Good morning, Warsaw Missionary Church. Have you noticed that there's just so much COVID-19 stuff going on, and they're talking about it, that it's just overwhelming? How do you keep track? After a while, it just becomes wah, 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 wah. I think the same thing happens when we read through the Old Testament law. Don't do this and don't do that, but only do it on Thursday, and only if it's made of wool by a woman that you're not related to. So how do you glean out of that what's most important? For example, in Leviticus 19, verses 11 through 19, it says this: do not steal. Do not deceive or cheat one another. Do not bring shame on the name of your God by using it to swear falsely. I am the Lord. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not make your hired workers wait until the next day to receive their pay. Do not insult the deaf or cause the blind to stumble. You must fear your God. I am the Lord. Do not twist justice on legal matters by favoring the poor or by being partial to the rich and powerful. Always judge people fairly. Do not spread slanderous gossip among your people. Do not stand idly by when your neighbor's life is threatened. I am the Lord. Do not nurse hatred in your heart for any of your relatives. Confront people directly so you will not be held guilty for their sin. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. You must obey all my decrees. That's a lot of stuff to be careful about. In fact, altogether, there were 613 Old Testament commands. We're struggling right now as a people because we're not clear about one command. Wash your hands, right? They had to do with, not ripping their clothing and what kind of food you could eat and what parts of your head you can't shave. 613 commands. That's an awful lot of things to keep track of. So what happens when two of those things come in conflict with each other? They were not supposed to work on the Sabbath. The law also says that you were supposed to help your animal. So what happens if your animal sneaks out on the Sabbath and gets stuck in a ditch? What do? Which command do you obey? Which one is most important? You see, different rabbis would rank the commands differently. All of the rabbis at Jesus' time agreed that the greatest commandment was to love the Lord your God. But there was major disagreement over what was the second most important command. Their opinions differed wildly. There were a number of rabbis that believed the second most important command was the one in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Jesus, as you remember, had lots of run-ins with those guys. They were protecting the Sabbath, so they saw it. So, the leaders wanted to know, what was the thinking of this new rabbi Jesus? How did he rank the commands? And so, one day, they asked him. Luke chapter 10, verse 25. One day, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question: Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus replied, what does the law of Moses say? How do you read it? The man answered, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. Right, Jesus told him. Do this, and you will live. The second greatest commandment, Jesus said, is to love your neighbor as yourself. And there are two extremes on the way we interpret that commandment. Some people say, I've got to love myself first, and so I'm going to take off 3 weeks and focus on loving myself. And then on the other end, you have people that say, I need to degrade myself so that I can love others better. Both of those are the extremes. The key word in that phrase is as. The same degree or same amount. Love your neighbor as yourself, not one above the other, both equally. So how do we do this? How do we love our neighbors? You see, we're going to talk about the Good Samaritan, but that's not a phrase that we understand the way they did at Jesus' time. Samaritan is not a bad term now like it was then. In fact, there are 10 Good Samaritan hospitals that I found. So we're going to change the term a little bit. Luke chapter 10, continuing on in verse 29. The man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest, let's say a senior pastor, came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed on the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant, or we could say a youth pastor, walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised atheist came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the atheist soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. And he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here." Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits, Jesus asked. The man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." He couldn't bring himself to say Samaritan because he despised them. Then Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same." So what are the action steps for us? How do we apply this to our lives? First thing, slow down. We need to slow down. It's one thing this pandemic has done is to slow us down. Before the pandemic, if aliens would observe our culture, they would say, these people are afraid to stay in one spot too long because if they do, they'll die. But research shows that when we're in a hurry, the more hurried we are, the less likely we are to notice someone in obvious pain beside us. We noticed this one day when we were going frisbee golfing. As we left one park, my son said, "Dad, don't you think we ought to stop and help that lady?" I didn't even notice. I was in a hurry to get the next place we were going. So we stopped, and it was a lady who had her bicycle was broken, and we took her to where she needed to go. My son helped me slow down. It goes on in that passage. It says, when he saw the man lying there. Second action step, see the need. We need to see the need. There's a part of our brain called the reticular activating center. That system, the RAS, has a bundle of nerves at our brainstem that filters out unnecessary information so that the important stuff gets through. When you think about it, we have a lot of information bombarding our brains every day, and so we can't take it in, and this filters it. You know, you can't listen or pay attention to everything, so this area of your brain is kind of like an assistant who keeps the other people away from annoying her boss. And so this one part of the brain, you can direct it. You can prompt it to look for certain things, and you'll begin noticing them all over the place. So what you can do at the beginning of your day, just have this thought every day. I wonder how I can help people today. I wonder how God wants me to help people today. When you do that, that primes that area of your brain, and you'll begin to notice those areas. It goes on in that passage. He said he felt compassion for him. Our next action step is to open your heart. Open your heart. The Greek word there for compassion is splaghnizomai. We get the organ name spleen from that word. The idea is that when he saw that, it wrenched his gut. He felt it. We see so many appeals that are designed to pull our heartstrings that we kind of turn that area off And what Jesus is saying, turn that area back on. Switch it to the most sensitive setting. Listen for God's nudging. When you're faced with a need, when you see something happening, just simply pray, God, what do you want me to do about this need? How do you want me to deal with this? And then it goes on, he soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them and put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. Here's what he did. This is our action step. Own the issue. Own the issue. Simply saying, hey, that's a need, distances from the need. It's essentially saying, that need way over there. Ooh, that's a bad thing over there. I'm glad it's over there and not here. Since it's over there, I don't have to do anything about it. If it was over here, I might have to do something about it. The real question is, how would you deal with that need if you saw it in the mirror? That's exactly how we need to view needs. That's the point that Jesus is making. Here's how this plays out in our lives today. There are people that say, the coronavirus isn't that bad. I can handle it. It's just the media going crazy. I'm just going to live my life and do what I want. I can survive COVID-19. You know what? They're right. A young person will more than likely survive the virus. The reason that I'm careful is not because I might die. The reason that I'm careful is because I don't want to kill someone else. I have here a bowl of 100 M&Ms. What if I told you that one of the M&Ms is poisoned, and if you eat it, it'll kill you? Would you eat a whole handful? Would you grab a whole handful and chuck them in your mouth? More importantly, would you give the bowl to your parents? Would you give it to your grandparents, to your neighbors? Of course you wouldn't. Why? Because you love your neighbor as yourself. Owning the issue means that I behave like I'm 75 years old and I have diabetes and emphysema, and I treat other people as I want to be treated myself. Next action step, do something. The bandits that beat him up and robbed him were still out there. He didn't fix the whole bandit issue. He didn't keep these bandits from striking again. This is huge. Issues that we see today are huge and complicated. But Jesus didn't say, fix everything. He simply said, love your neighbor. So do something. Do the one thing that you can do. There's a story, a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy picking up something and throwing it into the ocean. Going up to the boy, he said, what are you doing? The young boy replied, I'm throwing starfish back into the ocean. The tide has washed all these starfish up on the beach, and they can't return to sea by themselves. He said, when the sun gets high, they'll dry out and they'll die unless I throw them back in the water. Son, the man said, shaking his head, don't you realize there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds, if not thousands, of starfish? So you can't possibly make a difference. The boy simply bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it back in the ocean. He said, I made a difference for that one. Jesus didn't teach that we needed to fix everything. Just love God, love your neighbor, then do stuff. Let me tell you a story about my friend Don. It was about 7:30 a.m. and Don was making his usual drive to work as Director of Operations for Corvilla, an organization that serves adults with disabilities in South Bend. As he approached a three-way stop, Don noticed a car pulled over and a young woman was holding a baby next to the vehicle. Feeling like something was wrong, Don pulled to the side of the road and approached the woman, asking if she was okay. The young woman replied that her baby was choking and wasn't breathing. She was frantically trying to dislodge whatever the baby was choking on by swiping her finger around inside the baby's mouth. But the baby was turning blue. Don took the baby from her and performed the correct Heimlich maneuver for that age and size of a child. Seconds later, the baby began spitting and coughing. Whatever she was choking on had been dislodged. Don saved the baby's life and quietly got back into his car and went to work. Don was the right person in the right place at the right time. He had, just a couple of weeks before, completed the annual CPR training required to work at Corvilla. Thanks to his training, Don was able to stay calm and do what was necessary to save the baby's life. Here's the amazing thing. Don didn't mention the experience to anyone all day long at work until returning home and telling his wife. One of his colleagues ran into his wife later that week, and it's the only reason anyone ever found out about what a hero Don Wierenga really is. And a humble one at that. After his wife posted that story on Facebook, Don commented, "Thank you everyone for the kind and encouraging words. Admittedly, taking CPR training for what felt like the 100th time seemed like a waste, but it never is. Being trained and prepared makes the decision to get involved easy. I've seen co-workers over the years do much more than this, using CPR and other training to intervene, helping and protecting those in need. I work with heroes," he said. Another case that I know of, I know a UPS driver who was delivering to a business and got to know the lady that worked in the shipping department. And one day she was talking about the fact that she was pregnant and frustrated because she couldn't afford the baby. She told him that she was thinking about getting an abortion. And he said, I know a couple at my church that are looking to adopt a baby. And he put that lady in touch with that couple. And a life was saved. At the end of this playlist today is a video of Bob Goff. He is a hilarious man and really real about how God used him to affect the lives of so many people by simply taking the next step. My favorite quote from Bob Goff is this one: "Love God, love your neighbor, and do stuff." Now Jesus says to you, now go and do the same.